Mechanic gave a broken car to a cleaner as a joke and then deeply regretted it. Michael Anderson handed the keys to the wrecked Beetle to the cleaner as if it were a grand gesture, expecting to see gratitude on her face. What he didn't anticipate was that Sarah Parker would accept that pile of rust with a calm smile that would haunt him for weeks. "Here are the keys to your new car," said Michael, tossing the rusty keychain into Sarah's gloved hand. "Consider it a bonus for your excellent cleaning work." The other mechanics in the shop burst into laughter. Frank, the oldest of the group, clapped as if watching a comedy show. "Nice one, boss," shouted Jason, the youngest assistant. "I bet it'll take her a week just to realize it doesn't even have an engine anymore." Sarah looked at the keys in her hand, then at the blue Beetle that had been sitting in the back of the shop for over 2 years. The car had no hood, bald tires, and rust eating through its body. Any normal person would have handed the keys right back. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson," she said simply, slipping the keys into her apron pocket. Michael expected protests, tears, or at least a question about the car's condition. Sarah's calmness unsettled him. You understand this car isn't exactly roadworthy, right?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I understand perfectly," Sarah replied, going back to wiping the greasy floor. "A 1971 Beetle, 1.3-liter engine, front suspension likely has shock absorber issues, brakes needing a full overhaul. Nothing that can't be fixed with the right parts." The laughter died in Michael's throat. The other mechanics fell silent, staring at Sarah as if she'd just spoken in a foreign language. "How do you know that?" Frank asked, frowning. Sarah didn't answer right away. She kept cleaning as if she hadn't heard the question. Michael felt an inexplicable chill in his gut. "Hey, I asked you something," Frank pressed, stepping closer. "And I heard," Sarah said, standing up slowly. "But I'm not obligated to answer. My job here is to clean, not chat about cars." Michael watched Sarah walk out to fetch more cleaning supplies. Something about her didn't add up. In 6 months working there, she'd never shown any knowledge of cars. She'd always been quiet, polite, and efficient, but those words she'd just spoken weren't something a simple cleaner would say. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now, back to the story. "Boss, don't you think that's weird?" Jason whispered. "How did she know it was a 1.3-liter engine? Even we forgot those Beetle specs." Michael shook his head, trying to shake off the feeling that he'd made a terrible mistake. Sarah was just a cleaner. She couldn't know more about cars than him, a man with 15 years of shop experience. When Sarah returned, she carried a small notebook and pen. Michael watched as she knelt beside the Beetle and began jotting things down, examining the car carefully. "What are you doing?" he asked, stepping closer. "Making a list of what needs replacing," Sarah replied without looking up. "Burnt-out engine, transmission with a bad third-gear synchro, complete brake system, front suspension, tires, battery wiring. It's a lot, but nothing impossible." Michael's legs nearly gave out. How could she know about the third-gear synchro? That car had been sitting so long, even he'd forgotten the details of its issues. "Sarah, where did you learn these things?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She finally looked at him. Her brown eyes held an expression Michael had never noticed before. This wasn't the shy, submissive cleaning woman he knew. She was someone else. "I learned from life," she said simply. "Some people are born with it, others have to study. I was lucky enough to be born into a family that breathed engines." "What family?" Frank asked, stepping closer. Sarah sighed as if tired of carrying a heavy secret. "My father was William Parker. Maybe you've heard of him." The name hit Michael like a punch to the gut. William Parker was a legend around here. He ran a shop that serviced imported cars and was considered the best mechanic within 100 miles. Michael had been his apprentice for 2 years before opening his own shop. "Your father is William from Parker Automotive?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Was," Sarah corrected. "He passed 3 years ago. Heart problems." Michael felt the world spin around him. Sarah was William Parker's daughter, the man who had taught him everything he knew about cars, the man who always said women were just as capable as men when it came to engines, but society never gave them a chance. "Why didn't you say anything before?" Michael asked, trying to process the information. "Because it was nobody's business," Sarah replied, turning back to examine the car. "And because I didn't want to be treated differently because of my father. I wanted respect for my work, not the name I carry." Jason and Frank exchanged uncomfortable glances. Michael remembered perfectly how William used to talk about his daughter, how she understood cars better than most mechanics he knew. Back then, Michael thought it was just a father's pride. "Sarah, I had no idea," Michael stammered. "Of course you didn't," she said, standing up and wiping her hands on her apron. "You never cared to know anything about me beyond whether I was cleaning properly. To you, I was always just another cleaning lady." The truth in those words cut Michael like a blade. In 6 months, he'd never asked Sarah a personal question, never asked about her family, her dreams, her story. She was just a number on the payroll, a necessary but invisible role. "So you really know how to work on cars?" Frank asked, still skeptical. Sarah smiled for the first time since the conversation began. It was a smile that carried years of frustration and wasted knowledge. "Frank, I grew up under a car. I learned to change oil before I learned to ride a bike. By 16, I could diagnose problems just by the sound of the engine. My father always said I had perfect pitch for engines." Michael remembered that phrase. William always talked about having perfect pitch to identify car troubles. It was a rare skill few mechanics had. "But why are you working as a cleaner?" Jason asked. "With that knowledge, you could have had your own shop." Sarah's expression darkened. She stared at the ground for a few seconds before answering. "Because when my father passed, my older brother Charlie inherited the shop. He didn't think a woman could run a serious business, sold everything in 3 months and disappeared with the money. I was left with nothing, no references, because no one believes a woman can be a good mechanic." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Michael felt a lump in his throat he couldn't swallow. He had publicly humiliated the daughter of the man he respected most in the world. "Sarah, I'm sorry," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "No need to feel sorry," Sarah replied, tucking the notebook into her pocket. "You gave me this car as a joke, but for me, it's an opportunity. I'll restore it and show you what I'm capable of." "But you don't have tools or parts or—" Michael began. "I have knowledge," Sarah interrupted, "and knowledge is the only tool that really matters. The rest we can figure out." She walked out of the garage, leaving the 4 men in silence. Michael looked at the wrecked Beetle and for the first time wondered if he had completely underestimated the situation. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, remembering William's words about respecting everyone, no matter their role. He recalled how William treated the secretary, the janitor, the parts delivery guy, all with the same courtesy and respect. The next morning, Michael arrived at the garage earlier than usual. He wanted to talk to Sarah before the others arrived. But when he walked in, he was speechless. The Beetle had been moved. It was no longer leaning against the back wall, but stood in the center of the garage, propped up on makeshift stands. The hood was open, and Sarah was bent over the engine, wearing rubber gloves and holding a flashlight. "You're early," she said without looking up. "What are you doing?" Michael asked, still processing the scene. "Removing the engine," Sarah replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I need to inspect the block to see if it's worth rebuilding or if I should look for another one." Michael stepped closer and saw that Sarah had already disconnected most of the hoses and cables. The work was being done with surgical precision, each part removed in the correct order. "How did you move the car by yourself?" he asked. "I asked old Joe, the night watchman, for help," Sarah explained. "He helped me push it, and he borrowed these stands from a friend who runs a shop across town." Michael had known old Joe for years, but had never asked him for a favor. The fact that Sarah had gotten his help in one night showed she had social skills he'd underestimated. "Sarah, you don't have to do this," Michael said. "I can call off the joke and—" "It's not a joke anymore," Sarah interrupted, finally looking at him. "You gave me this car. Now it's mine. And I'm going to turn it into something beautiful." The determination in her voice made Michael swallow the words he was about to say. Sarah had accepted the challenge in a way he hadn't expected. "But the parts, they'll cost a fortune," he tried to argue. Sarah smiled, a smile Michael couldn't quite read. "Leave that to me," she said. When Frank, Jason, and the other mechanics arrived, they found Sarah with the Beetle's engine already removed and disassembled on the floor. The parts were sorted into groups, each one cleaned and catalogued. "My God," Frank murmured, "she really knows what she's doing." Michael spent the day watching Sarah work. Every move was precise, every decision made with deep knowledge. She examined each engine component like a doctor diagnosing a patient, spotting issues that weren't always obvious. By the end of the shift, Sarah had completed a full analysis of the engine. She had a detailed list of every part that needed replacing and an accurate cost estimate. "The block is in good shape," she announced to Michael. "It just needs resurfacing. The pistons are shot, but that was expected. The camshaft has some scratches, but nothing that can't be fixed." Michael looked at the list Sarah had made. It was more detailed and professional than many estimates he prepared for clients. "How much do you think all this will cost?" he asked. "About $3,000 if you buy new parts," Sarah replied. "Half that if you can find good used ones." Michael swallowed hard. That was a hefty sum for a janitor earning minimum wage. "Sarah, how are you going to get that kind of money?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah packed her makeshift tools into a cardboard box. "That's my business," she said. "But don't worry, I'll manage it." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. In the days that followed, Michael noticed subtle changes in the shop's routine. Sarah kept up with her janitorial duties as efficiently as ever, but in her free time she worked on the Beetle. She arrived early and stayed late, always tinkering with the car. What puzzled Michael most was how Sarah kept getting parts for it. Every week new components appeared: pistons, gaskets, hoses, filters, all original or top quality. "Where's she getting these parts?" Frank asked one Thursday afternoon, watching Sarah install what looked like a brand new starter motor. "No idea," Michael answered, "and she won't talk about it with anyone." Jason, always the most curious of the bunch, decided to investigate. He discreetly followed Sarah when she went out for lunch and made a surprising discovery. "Boss, you won't believe what I saw," he said when he returned out of breath. "What happened?" Michael asked. "Sarah went to a junkyard across town, but she wasn't buying parts, she was selling them." "Selling what?" "Some old parts she brought in a box. The junkyard guy seemed to know her well, called her Williams girl, and treated her with a lot of respect." Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Sarah was selling her own belongings to buy parts for the Beetle. The car he'd given as a cruel joke was being restored with tears and sacrifice. "There's more," Jason continued. "I overheard her talking to the junkyard guy. He said he still had some of her father's old tools stored away and could sell them to her at a special price. Sarah thanked him but said she didn't have the money right now." Michael spent the rest of the day turning this over in his mind. Sarah was selling personal items to restore a car he'd given her as a joke. The guilt, he felt, was turning into something much deeper and more painful. That night, Michael made a decision. He went to the junkyard Jason had mentioned and found the owner, a man in his 60s named Dennis, closing up shop. "Good evening," Michael said. "I wanted to talk about Sarah Parker." Dennis stopped what he was doing and eyed Michael suspiciously. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Michael, owner of the shop where she works. I heard you two know each other." Dennis's expression grew even more guarded. "I've known Sarah since she was a child," he said. "William was my friend. Why are you asking about her?" Michael took a deep breath before answering. "Because I made a terrible mistake, and I want to try to make it right." Dennis crossed his arms, waiting for an explanation. Michael told him everything: the cruel joke, the discovery of who Sarah really was, how she was sacrificing her own belongings to restore the Beetle. When he finished, Dennis looked at him with a mix of anger and contempt. "You humiliated William's daughter?" Dennis asked, his voice thick with indignation. "Yes," Michael admitted, "and now I want to try to make amends." "Son, you have no idea what you've done," Dennis said, shaking his head. "Sarah's the most capable person I know. When William passed, she kept the shop running for 2 months until her brother sold it all." She knows more about cars than you and me combined. I know that now, Michael said. That's why I want to help. I'd like to buy her father's tools that you've been keeping and give them to her. Dennis studied Michael for a long moment. Why would you do that? He asked. Because it's the least I can do, Michael replied. William taught me everything I know. Humiliating his daughter was a betrayal of everything he taught me about respect and dignity. Dennis sighed and motioned for Michael to follow him to the back of the junkyard. There, in a locked shed, was an impressive collection of tools neatly arranged on workbenches and in boxes. William was very careful with his tools, Dennis explained. When the shop was sold, I managed to buy all this. I was saving it for Sarah, but she never had the money to buy them back. Michael looked at the tools with reverence. He recognized many of them. William had used some to teach him when he was an apprentice. How much do you want for all of it? Michael asked. $5,000, Dennis answered. It's less than half what they're worth, but it's what I agreed with Sarah. Michael didn't hesitate. He took out his credit card and made the purchase right away. But he had one condition for Dennis. Don't tell her it was me who bought them, Michael requested. Make up any excuse. Say a collector showed up interested in donating to a good cause. Anything. Dennis nodded, but looked confused. Why don't you want her to know? He asked. Because she probably wouldn't accept them if she knew they came from me, Michael explained. And she deserves to have her father's tools back. The following Friday, Dennis showed up at Michael's shop, carrying several boxes of tools. Sarah was working on the Beetle when he arrived. Sarah, my dear, Dennis called. A collector from New York showed up interested in your father's tools. He wants to donate them to someone who will actually use them. I thought of you. Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at the boxes with tears in her eyes. Uncle Dennis, I can't accept this, she said. These tools are worth a fortune. The man doesn't want money, Dennis lied gently. He said he'd rather know they're in the hands of someone who'll honor William's memory. Sarah walked over to the boxes and opened one. Inside were the screwdrivers, pliers, and wrenches she'd seen her father use thousands of times. She picked up a wrench and held it like a treasure. These tools have my father's fingerprints on them, she murmured, her voice breaking. Michael, who was watching from a distance, felt a lump in his throat. Seeing Sarah reunited with her father's tools was both moving and painful. With the right tools, work on the Beetle progressed much faster. Sarah worked with a precision that even impressed Michael. Every adjustment was perfect, every component installed as if it was surgery. She's really good, Frank commented one afternoon, watching Sarah adjust the engine's carburetor. Better than most mechanics I know, Michael silently agreed. Sarah wasn't just competent, she was exceptional. She had an intuition for engines that couldn't be taught, only developed through years of experience and genuine passion. But something still bothered Michael. Sarah kept working as a cleaner during the day and on the Beetle at night. She was wearing herself out physically, but showed no intention of stopping. Sarah, you can't keep this up, Michael said one Thursday night as she finished installing the car's electrical system. Keep what up? She asked, not looking up from her work. Working 2 jobs. You're killing yourself. Sarah smiled, but it was a tired smile. I'm doing what I need to do, she said. This car will be finished no matter the cost. But why? Michael asked. Why is this so important to you? Sarah finally stopped working and looked at him. Her eyes reflected iron determination, but also deep pain. Because it's the only way to prove I exist, she said. For 6 months, you all treated me like I was invisible. A function, not a person. This car is my chance to show who I really am. Sarah's words hit Michael like a slap in the face. She was right. In 6 months, he had never seen Sarah as a full human being with a story, knowledge, and dreams. Sarah, he began, but she interrupted him. You don't need to say anything, she said, returning to work. I got the message a long time ago. Michael left the shop that night carrying a weight in his chest that seemed to grow heavier each day. He was beginning to understand that his joke had caused far deeper harm than he'd imagined. On Saturday, Michael decided to go to the shop even though it was closed. He wanted to watch Sarah work without the pressure of other employees around. When he arrived, He found her welding a part of the chassis that had been damaged by rust. "You know how to weld too?" he asked, genuinely impressed. Sarah lifted the welding mask and looked at him. "My father used to say a complete mechanic needs to know a little of everything," she replied. "Welding, electrical work, painting, upholstery. I learned it all from him." Michael examined the work Sarah had done on the chassis. The welds were perfect, professional, better than many specialized welders he knew. "Sarah, can I ask you a personal question?" he said. She looked at him warily, but nodded. "Why didn't you open your own shop after your brother sold your father's? With this skill you could have." Sarah turned off the welding equipment and removed her gloves. "I tried," she said, "but no one trusts a woman mechanic. Customers would come in, see me, and leave. Some wouldn't even let me explain the estimate. Others made jokes about keeping women in the kitchen." Michael felt a surge of anger toward the men who had treated Sarah that way, but then he realized he had been one of them. "That must have been really hard," he said. "It was," Sarah admitted. "So when I saw the ad for a cleaning job here, I thought at least I'd have steady work. I figured maybe with time you'd realize I knew cars and give me a chance." Sarah's confession felt like a knife to Michael's heart. She had taken the cleaning job hoping for an opportunity to prove herself, and he had destroyed that chance with a cruel joke. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Michael asked. "Because I learned people have to be ready to listen," Sarah replied. "And you weren't ready. Maybe you still aren't." Michael spent the rest of the weekend thinking about that conversation. Sarah was right. He hadn't been ready to listen 6 months ago. Maybe he wasn't even ready now, but he wanted to be. On Monday, Michael made a decision that would change everything. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said when she arrived for work. "If it's about the Beetle, I can move it," she replied, assuming he was going to complain about the space it took up. "It's not about the Beetle," Michael said. "It's about an offer I want to make." Sarah stopped organizing the cleaning supplies and looked at him curiously. "What kind of offer?" she asked. Michael took a deep breath. What he was about to say would change the shop's dynamic forever. "I want to offer you a job as a mechanic," he said. "Experienced mechanic salary, profit sharing, flexible hours so you can finish your personal projects." Sarah stayed silent for a long moment, processing the offer. "Why?" she finally asked. "Because you're better than any mechanic who's ever worked here," Michael answered. "And because it's the right thing to do." Sarah slowly shook her head. "I don't believe you," she said. The response caught Michael by surprise. "What do you mean it?" he asked. "For 6 months you treated me like I was invisible. Now that you know who I am, you want to give me a chance. That's not generosity, Michael. It's convenience." Sarah's words were harsh, but Michael knew she was right. "You're right," he admitted. "I should have seen your worth from day one. I can't change the past, but I can try to do right by you now." "Doing right would have meant giving me a chance when I still believed people could pleasantly surprise me," Sarah said. "Now it's too late." She walked out of the garage, leaving Michael alone with his guilt and regret. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers tremendously. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Sarah kept working as usual, but Michael noticed a change in her demeanor. She was more closed off, more distant. His proposal, instead of bringing them closer, had built an even higher wall between them. The Beetle was nearly finished. Sarah had replaced practically everything that needed replacing. The engine ran perfectly. The electrical work was flawless. The suspension had been completely rebuilt. Only the paint job and some interior finishing touches remained. "How much longer do you think it'll take?" Frank asked one afternoon, admiring Sarah's work. 2 weeks, Sarah replied. "Maybe 3 if I decide to add some special details." Michael watched Sarah work with a mix of admiration and sadness. Admiration for the extraordinary skill she demonstrated. Sadness knowing he'd lost the chance to have someone like her on his team. But fate still had some surprises in store. On Wednesday, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s appeared at the garage. He was driving a vintage Cadillac and seemed to be looking for someone specific. "Good afternoon," he said to Michael. "I'm looking for Sarah Parker. I heard she works here." Michael pointed toward the back of the garage where Sarah was adjusting the Beetle's headlights. "Sarah," he called. "Someone's here to see you." Sarah looked toward the visitor, and her expression changed completely. She dropped her tools and hurried toward the man. "Mr. Mitchell," she exclaimed, "what are you doing here?" The man smiled warmly and embraced Sarah. "Sarah, my dear, I finally found you. Dennis told me where you were working." Michael and the other mechanics watched the scene curiously. "Who's that guy?" Jason whispered to Frank. "No idea," Frank replied. "But he looks important." Robert glanced around the garage before focusing on Sarah again. "Sarah, I have a proposal for you," he said. "I'm opening a specialty shop for classic cars and need someone with your skills to run the business." Sarah looked visibly surprised. "Mr. Mitchell, you know I don't have experience managing a garage," she said. "But you have something far more valuable," Robert replied. "You have the knowledge and passion your father had, and I have the capital and connections you need." Michael felt his stomach drop. He was losing Sarah to someone else, and there was nothing he could do. "What exactly are you proposing?" Sarah asked. "A 50-50 partnership," Robert explained. "You handle the technical side. I take care of administration and finances. The shop would be registered under both our names, and all profits would be split equally." The offer was far better than anything Michael could propose. Robert clearly had financial resources he lacked. "Can I think about it?" Sarah asked. "Of course," Robert replied. "But don't take too long. I want to open the shop next month, and I need to know if I can count on you." After Robert left, Michael approached Sarah. "Who was that man?" he asked. "Robert Mitchell," Sarah answered. "He was my father's client. Has a collection of vintage cars and always brought them to my father for restoration. He's very wealthy and very serious about business." Michael felt he was losing Sarah for good. Robert's offer was far better than anything he could match. "Are you going to accept his proposal?" Michael asked. Sarah glanced at the Beetle, then at Michael. "I don't know yet," she said. "It's an incredible opportunity, but it's also risky. Partnerships are serious business." Michael nodded, trying to hide his desperation. "If you decide to accept, I'll understand," he said. "It's a better opportunity than anything I can offer here." Sarah studied him for a moment. "Michael, can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you really offer me that mechanic job? Was it out of pity, guilt, or because you actually believe in my work?" The question caught Michael off guard. He knew Sarah deserved an honest answer. "At first it was guilt," he admitted. "But after watching you work on this Beetle, it's because I believe in your work. You're extraordinary, Sarah, better than me at many things." Sarah nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "I'll think about Mr. Mitchell's proposal and give you an answer tomorrow." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He paced his room, replaying everything that had happened. He was about to lose the most talented person he'd ever met because of his own arrogance and prejudice. The next morning, Michael arrived at the shop determined to make one last attempt. He found Sarah working on the Beetle, making final adjustments before painting. "Sarah, before you give me your answer, I want to say something," he said. She stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "I know I've made terrible mistakes with you," Michael continued. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I wanted you to know these past months have changed me. Watching you work, seeing your determination, your skill, it made me realize how wrong I was about so many things." Sarah listened in silence. "If you decide to stay here, I promise it won't just be as a mechanic," Michael said. "I want you as my partner. We'll change the shop's name to Anderson and Parker. You'll have full technical freedom, and I'll handle the administrative work you dislike." The proposal took Sarah by surprise. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Completely serious," Michael replied. "Your father taught me how to work on cars. You taught me how to work with people, a far more valuable lesson." Sarah was silent for a long moment, processing the offer. "What about the other employees?" she asked. "Frank, Jason, the others? How will they react to having a woman as their boss?" "Anyone who doesn't like it can find another job," Michael said without hesitation. This shop needs people who respect skill, not prejudice. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. Michael, I'll accept your offer, she said, but on one condition. What? He asked eagerly. I want to finish this beetle before starting as your partner, Sarah said. It's important for me to finish what I started. Michael nodded immediately. Of course, and Sarah, thank you for giving me a second chance I don't deserve. Everyone deserves a second chance, Sarah said. My father always said that. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the shop changed completely. Michael announced to all the employees that Sarah would be promoted to partner and that any disrespectful behavior would result in immediate dismissal. The reaction was mixed. Frank, who was the oldest and most experienced, was initially skeptical, but after seeing Sarah diagnose and fix a complex problem in an imported engine in less than an hour, he completely changed his mind. She's really good, he admitted to Michael. Better than most mechanics I've ever seen. Jason, being younger, adapted more easily. He started asking Sarah technical questions and was impressed by her knowledge. 2 employees, however, didn't take the change well. They quit, claiming they wouldn't work for a woman. Michael let them go without trying to convince them to stay. Safe travels, he said as they left. This shop isn't a place for people like that. The Beetle was almost finished. Sarah had chosen a navy blue paint job with chrome details that made the car look brand new. Inside, she had restored the original seats and installed a modern sound system that kept the vintage aesthetic. It's looking beautiful, Michael remarked one afternoon, admiring the progress. Thank you, Sarah said. It's exactly how my father would have done it. By Friday, Sarah had put the final touches on the paint. The Beetle was unrecognizable. It looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line, but with the charm and personality only classic cars possess. It's ready, Sarah announced, stepping back to admire her work. Michael and all the employees gathered around the car. It was hard to believe this masterpiece had once been the pile of rust he'd given Sarah as a cruel joke. Sarah, this is incredible, Frank said, shaking his head in admiration. You turned junk into a work of art. Sarah smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. I didn't do it alone, she said. My father taught me everything I know. Every bolt I tightened, every weld I made. It was all with the knowledge he passed down to me. Michael felt a lump in his throat. Seeing Sarah emotional reminded him of how this whole story had begun, a joke that had turned into a life lesson. Sarah, he said, I want to apologize again, publicly, in front of everyone. Sarah looked at him, surprised. Michael, you don't have to... Yes, I do, he interrupted. I want everyone to know I made a terrible mistake. I tried to humiliate you with a cruel joke, but you turned that humiliation into a victory. You taught me that skill has no gender, that dignity is more important than pride, and that sometimes the most valuable people are the ones we overlook. All the employees listened in silence. Jason started clapping, followed by Frank and the others. Sarah was visibly moved. Thank you, Michael, she said. That means a lot to me. To me too, Michael replied. Now how about we take this spectacular Beetle for a spin? Sarah grabbed the keys she had restored herself and got into the car. The engine started on the first try, with a smooth, powerful growl that signaled perfect workmanship. Want to drive? Sarah asked Michael. No, he answered. This is your moment. You've earned it. Sarah drove the Beetle through the city, with Michael in the passenger seat. The car ran flawlessly, every component working in harmony. It was impossible to believe that just a few months ago, this vehicle had been completely destroyed. Sarah, can I ask you something? Michael said as they walked back to the shop. Of course. When I handed you the keys that first day, did you already know you could restore the car? Sarah smiled. Of course I did, she said. A 71 Beetle in any condition can be restored if you know what you're doing, and I always knew. Then, why did you accept it? Why didn't you humiliate me in front of the others by showing I'd underestimated you? Sarah thought for a moment before answering. Because sometimes the best way to prove our worth is through work, not words, she said. And because I wanted you to realize on your own that you'd made a mistake, Forcing someone to acknowledge our value never works. They have to figure it out for themselves. Michael nodded, impressed by Sarah's wisdom. And you did figure it out, Sarah continued. It might have taken a while, but you did. When they returned to the shop, they found Robert waiting at the door. Sarah, he called, I came to hear your answer about our partnership. Sarah looked at Michael, then at Robert. Mr. Mitchell, I really appreciate the offer, but I'll have to decline, she said. Robert seemed genuinely surprised. May I ask why? He asked. Because I've found a partnership right here, Sarah explained, and sometimes the best opportunities are right in front of us. We just need to see them. Robert glanced at Michael, then back at Sarah. I understand, he said. Well, if you change your mind, my offer still stands. After Robert left, Michael turned to Sarah. Thank you, he said simply. Don't thank me yet, Sarah replied with a playful smile. Being my partner won't be easy. I've got plenty of ideas to improve this shop. Michael laughed. I look forward to hearing them, he said. In the months that followed, Anderson and Parker became the go-to shop in the area. Sarah introduced new diagnostic methods, specialized services for classic cars, and partnerships with import part suppliers. The number of female customers grew significantly. Many remarked how comfortable they felt bringing their cars to a shop with a woman mechanic who understood and respected them. I never thought having a partner would make such a difference, Michael commented one afternoon, looking at the fully booked schedule. Diversity always makes a difference, Sarah replied. My father used to say a team with different perspectives always finds better solutions. Sarah's Beetle became something of a mascot for the shop. She always parked it out front, like a business card showcasing the quality of their work. Do you regret giving me the car? Sarah asked one evening as they closed up. Michael looked at the gleaming Beetle, then at the thriving shop they'd built together. Never, he answered. It was the best decision I ever made, even if it was for the wrong reasons. And I never regretted accepting it, Sarah said. Sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as insults. They laughed together, remembering how it all began. 2 years later, Anderson and Parker had expanded. They had a team of 8 mechanics, including 3 women Sarah had trained herself. They specialized in classic car restoration and had a 6-month waiting list. Michael had learned a lot about leadership, respect, and the importance of valuing everyone regardless of role or appearance. Sarah had proven that talent and determination can overcome any prejudice. The Beetle remained the shop's symbol. Always impeccable, always turning heads, always reminding everyone that appearances can be deceiving and that everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth. You know something? Michael said one Saturday morning as they worked together on a Mustang 73. What? Sarah asked, not looking up from the engine. I think your father would be proud, Michael said. Sarah smiled, wiping her hands on a towel. I'm sure he would, she said. He always said true pride comes from overcoming adversity with dignity. And you've done exactly that, Michael replied. Sarah glanced around the shop. Employees working with skill and mutual respect, satisfied customers, a thriving business, all built on the foundation of a joke that could have shattered her confidence, but which she turned into an opportunity to grow. We've done it, she corrected, because learning from mistakes is also a way to grow. Michael nodded, grateful to have learned one of life's most important lessons, that true success doesn't come from belittling others, but from recognizing and valuing the potential in every person. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this inspiring story and how it moved you. Have you ever faced a similar situation where you had to prove your worth? Share your experience in the comments. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, pass it along so more people can find inspiration. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.